episode 5 of Athena Rising, where we pose 36 questions to powerhouse female lawyers. Why 36? That's the number of states who are required to ratify the 19th Amendment, give women the right to vote, and yes, take power into our own hands.
Our guest today is Alejandra Lopez, a career prosecutor, strong Latina woman, and a foodie.
On this episode, Alejandra talks about what life is really like for a federal prosecutor, some tough cases that she's faced, and of course, she gives us restaurant recommendations.
We're glad you're tuning in to our podcast, whether you are an Athena or an ally. Welcome, ladies. Let's rise. Hi, Vanessa.
Hey, Marisol, how are you?
I'm a little tired. How about you?
I'm very tired. It's Friday. We're happy that it's Friday because the weekend's here. More importantly, we have a very special guest today, Alejandro Lopez. Ale is a federal prosecutor and a friend of mine, so I'm really glad she's on the show. A little bit about Ale. For 17 years, she's been a prosecutor either at the state attorney's office or at the U.S. attorney's office. She is Puerto Rican. She'll tell you a little bit about her background. We'll ask her about that. She does really, really, really tough cases. She is a go-getter. She's a credible lawyer, Harvard trained, Tulane trained. She is a phenomenal person, and I'm so glad that she's doing this and that she's here with us today.
Welcome, Ale. And before we start...
Hi, guys.
Hi. We'll just do our little disclaimer that Ale is a prosecutor. She works for the United States Attorney in the Southern District of Florida. Whatever she tells us today are her personal opinions, not the opinions or beliefs of the Office of the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of Florida.
Or the Department of Justice. She's
Correct.
speaking...
Either one.
Yes,
they're all mine. They're all mine.
They're all yours. You're
Yes.
speaking as an independent human today.
Yeah. So
I know, go
without,
figure.
yeah. So without further ado, we'll start with our 36 questions. So first one, Ale, you're a federal prosecutor in Special Prosecutions Unit. Can you tell us what that means?
So special prosecutions is the section within the Southern District of Florida that handles murder cases, violent crimes, including armed robberies, child exploitation cases, which go anywhere from sextortion online of children, enticement of children, and child pornography. And then we also handle all of the human trafficking, labor trafficking cases in the office as well. So we handle the best of mankind, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Sounds that way.
Ale, you are a prosecutor's prosecutor. And I know what that means. You know what that means. You've been a prosecutor your whole career. You were an ASA before you were an AUSA. But if you had to do something else in the law, what would you do?
You know, people are often surprised when I say this, but I initially considered becoming a public defender in New Orleans when I was in law school. I did the criminal defense clinic at Tulane. There wasn't a prosecution clinic, I will admit that, but I thought it was a worthy thing to do. My last year at Tulane was Katrina, so we weren't there for half the year. But when we came back, we did do a lot of worthwhile work. And I was able to see sort of the important work that the defense does. So it was something that I actually considered. Now with Katrina, no one was hiring in New Orleans. So I ended up coming to Miami and doing sort of what my initial thought process had been for most of my life, which was to be a prosecutor. But I think it gave me a very good perspective as a prosecutor as to what the defense has to deal with, right? They have certain issues and responsibilities that prosecutors do not have because they have clients. And so it's certainly given me a good perspective on the kind of work that the defense counsel does. So it still helped in my practice, even if I didn't do it.
Yeah, it's nice to have both perspectives, no matter the side that you're on.
How many cases have you tried?
Oof. I'm going to give you a ballpark figure because I haven't counted them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say somewhere, jury trials, somewhere between like 60 to 75.
Wow, that's a lot. So what is your favorite or one of your favorites? You may not be able to tell us the absolute favorite.
Mm-hmm.
You may not be able to think of it on the spot, but what's your favorite trial or war story?
I think my favorite trial has to be, it was actually two trials, same case. I tried them with the senior trial counsel at the state attorney's office called Michael Von Zampt, and with Ansley Peacock, who was our appellate person at the time, who was with us. And it was a double homicide in Miami Gardens of a very innocent couple. The investigation was interesting to put together. The trial was very long, but we had this murder, and then there was a companion attempted carjacking robbery that occurred like 20 minutes before. And that's sort of how these defendants ended up getting caught. They left their fingerprints at both scenes, and so we were able to sort of put a case together. But it was an interesting case to put together because it wasn't super easy to find the defendants in the beginning. The victims, unlike, I did a lot of gang cases when I was at the state. Not all of your victims in gang cases are going to be sympathetic because they're often other gang members. These were truly sympathetic, innocent victims, just wrong place, wrong time. And it was very, we ended up doing the first Miller hearing in the building, I think, or the second one after Miller was instituted because one of our defendants was under 18 at the time. So it just had all these different issues, very good defense attorneys on both sides. So it was a worthwhile case to do because the families of the victims are just very nice people, and the victims deserved justice in that case. But it was also, just from a legal standpoint, just the issues involved were very interesting, and it was complex. So I think that's probably the one that I've enjoyed the most. And it was in front of a great judge who was a pleasure being in front of. So
it sounds like you learned a lot too.
Yes. And the judge was amazing. I think we all, having to do like one of the first Miller hearings in the state courthouse, I think was, we were all learning at the same time how to do those kind of hearings.
And so we have to ask you, it's not one of our scripted questions, but for people who are listening to this and don't know, what is a Miller hearing?
So before the Miller versus Alabama, which is the Supreme Court case that I'm referring to when we say Miller hearing, juveniles, meaning kids who committed murders under the years of 18 or under, could be sentenced automatically to life. If their state statute, for example, Florida, which is where I practiced, if you committed a first-degree murder, it was an automatic life sentence, no matter what you got, unless death was waived, right? If death was on the table, then obviously you'd go to that phase. What Miller said was, no, you can't give them automatic life. You have to take into account and have a hearing that discusses other factors such as their youth, their family history, any drug, substance abuse, etc. And so we ended up having the sentencing hearing to go through all those factors. It was one of the first couple of ones. I think I might have done the first one with Judge Luck. Now on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, but I think I might have done the first one with him, and then this one might have been the second one. So, nobody had done it before. No one knew exactly how it was going to suss out, but we were able to, again, because everyone on that case was just so professional, between the defense and the judge and us, and we all got along well. I think it just ended up being a perfect first hearing. So.
Yeah, and you couldn't have gotten a better judge who was a consummate professional. Judge Luck was my first supervisor in the U.S. Attorney's Office. So,
I didn't know that.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, so. He's fantastic. He's fantastic.
He's great.
And the judge we had this case in front of was Judge Miguel de la O in state court, who's amazing as well. So we lucked out. I lucked out when I had those two hearings in front of those two judges.
Yes.
So what's the craziest juror note that you've ever received?
Craziest juror note was a jury note after a DUI that I tried. So this is the very beginning of my career. So this really started off with a bang. And it was a young kid who had been charged with a DUI. It was clear he was drunk when he was driving. He blew into the machine, the whole nine. And the jurors found him not guilty. And the juror note that came along with it was, we all believe you're guilty, but we're giving you a second chance.
Oh my gosh.
Now it's a DUI, so there are worse crimes, right?
Wow.
So at least it was a DUI, but it was very good to get that at the beginning of your career, because it really does let you see what a jury's thinking. Like they could think, he's guilty, but sometimes people don't actually follow the law, even though
they nullified, man. Yeah, they're not supposed to do that, but it happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So tell us about an instance where a witness said something on the witness stand totally unexpected, and how you pivoted in that situation to fix it.
Geez, let me think. I once had a witness who was being cross-examined by the defendant. He decided to represent himself. And
That's always an interesting choice, but okay.
always an interesting choice. He had amazing backup counsel, which, you know, in my opinion, he should have kept him on, but he was cross-examining the victim of the attempted murder, who is, of course, a witness to the murder of another victim. And he starts to try and, in his own way, of course, is trying to get her to say that when she's running away, she can't see him actually shoot the other victim, because she gets shot first and then she takes off running.
Okay.
Mhm.
And but her testimony was that she looked back as she kept hearing the shots, because she was afraid he was still shooting at her, and that's when he sees the defendant standing over the victim shooting him on the ground. And so he says, you know, you were running away, because she's like, yeah, I was running away. I was running away because you were shooting at me. And she basically called him a name. My first reaction, because it was an expletive, was to get up and object, and like, but I knew I couldn't, right? I mean, it just is what it is. It's what she said. And then afterwards, so the judge admonished her, told her not to speak that way on the stand, you know, told the jury to disregard that. And then he asked me for any redirect, and I said no. Even though I thought there were lots of issues that I could sort of clean up with her, and things that I could make clear, I decided not to, because she was just too emotional. And I just saw like it didn't matter who was going to be leading her questioning, it was going to be too much. So I decided to leave it alone. And she was actually, after the trial was done and we let her know that it was a guilty and that she had the right to be at sentencing, she actually chastised me for not asking her questions. But I told her, look, you know, you can't, I made a strategic decision. I didn't think it was necessary. So
yeah. I mean, that's probably, I think, the hardest part of our job, is to know when to stop in the courtroom. Like when you've got to just figure, and you got to do it in real time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we tried a case where a witness went crazy, not on me, but on Marisol.
Oh, that's fine.
And was completely screaming her head off.
Yes.
And so I think at some point, even though it's going well as the lawyer, you got to know when the jury's like, you got to be a little bit empathetic and let this person, you know, just go.
Yeah.
Well, and there, you know, it's like I tell young prosecutors, whether it's been at the state or in the federal system, you know, at the end of the day, as much as you'd like to, as a lawyer, you want to make sure you get all your points out, but there does come a point where we as prosecutors have to make sure we're doing the right thing, regardless of what we may think is the best thing.
Yeah.
For the case. And sometimes that often means that we don't ask questions, and we don't get involved because we can't. In that case, I knew she was going to probably say something that was going to be problematic, and I decided it was just best not to ask her any questions.
Yes.
Here's another question for you. Do you think that jurors react differently to male versus female litigators?
Yes, but I think for different reasons and depending on the case. So my experience has been that, and I hate to say this, but if there's some sort of like sympathetic defendant, for example, and you were a pregnant female prosecutor, it kind of tended to even out the sympathies. If a male attorney was beating up on a female, jurors usually, I could tell, did not like that. Whether that's right or wrong, they didn't like that at all. My personal experience, though, has been usually they would underestimate the female prosecutors in the room. They would usually, especially if it was an older male attorney, they would see the older male attorney and assume that that attorney knows more and knows what he's talking about because he's an older male attorney. And I have had state jurors come after court after the trial's done, because, you know, we can't approach the jurors, but they can approach us, say like, oh, you guys were great, and we thought that he was going to know more, but you guys knew more than he did. So I think sometimes it is a little bit, they underestimate females, especially if you're younger or look younger. I'd like to think I still look young. So
You do. You do.
but thank you.
We all do.
Thank
We're
you.
young.
Yeah, we're still
come
young.
on, guys. We're
I'm
young.
young.
Yeah.
So I've seen that, but I think generally speaking, I think jurors just want to hear the case, and if you've got it, you've got it, and if you don't, you don't. And so you can be the most amazing razzmatazz of a lawyer, but if you don't have the facts on your side, then
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to sway them either way. Now, if they don't like you, that may sway them, but I don't think it's going to sway them if as the prosecutor you don't have the evidence, they're not going to vote guilty.
What do you love the most about being a trial lawyer and more specifically a prosecutor?
What I like about being a trial lawyer is the fact that it is it's kind of like the Super Bowl. It is the pinnacle of each case. I like putting things together so that people can understand them. I like teaching. So I look at trials as a time to like teach the jurors, these are the facts, and this is how the law applies to them. And so I enjoy it when I feel like the jurors are getting it. As a prosecutor, I like the fact that even though I can do all these great things in trial, just like any lawyer can, at the end of the day, my job is to do the right thing in the trial, regardless of whether or not, like I said before, it's the best thing. So sometimes there might be a better strategy or a better argument or a better catchphrase that you could say, but as the prosecutor, your job is not to do that if it's not the right thing to do. And I like that I get to do the right thing at all times. That's my job, amongst others, is to do the right thing always. So that's probably the part that I like most about being in trial as a prosecutor. Is it is my burden. I think it's a hard burden. I think it should be a hard burden. And I like being the person who has to prove that burden. I don't think it's easy, and I think that's part of the challenge of being a trial lawyer when you're a prosecutor.
I think a lot of defense attorneys would not agree with you. But what has been the most rewarding case you've ever worked on?
Oof. I've had a couple, to be honest with you. I think though that I would probably have to go back to a case that I did. It was probably in the middle of my career as a prosecutor in state court. It was a girl who had been I guess taken advantage of by a teacher who was her teacher, and it was charged as a sexual battery on a child between 12 and 16. And that girl went through a lot of trauma as a result of that. But years later, and I'm talking about, I probably did this case when I was a B-level attorney at the state, so probably 2010. About 4 years later, I got this wonderful letter from her. She had gone to college and she had, become a professional, and that she thanked me for helping her through that case so that she could kind of put it behind her. And that really sort of, I think sometimes as prosecutors, we have to maintain an objectivity with the victims of the case, because if we don't maintain objectivity, we are not thinking correctly about the case itself, about its merits, about what's a fair resolution to whatever defendant is on the other end of that case. But it's also a very thankless case. Most victims don't thank you. Yeah. Most families don't thank you. I'm sure when you have clients, that's probably the same as well.
No, they filed 2255 over here, so it's
worse.
there's
It's
no
worse.
thinking. There's no thinking.
It's just a complaint.
Having had to defend them, yes, that's what I was thinking about. But it really, sometimes you do these cases because it's right, et cetera, and you have to divorce yourself a little bit emotionally from what's going on with the victims. But I think that letter really sort of let me see sort of the important work that prosecutors do in at least letting victims have their day in court, letting them feel like the system is hearing them and also cares about them. Obviously, the system cares about defendants, and defendants have rights, and they should have rights. But I feel like, these cases sort of like remind you that even in the little things that you do, because that case pled out, it didn't go to trial. It was a case where we took a plea, and she didn't have to testify. But even in that little thing, she felt like it did a lot for her. So That's probably the what I've gotten the most satisfaction out of.
Yeah, we'll ask one more question before we get to the fun questions that we call, as we call them,
Okay.
the fun ones, right? But you mentioned something that I don't think a lot of people know is that, you know, when you are a prosecutor and you do victim-centric cases, and I worked in special pros with you, so I think I understand this, is you can only allow yourself to get so close to your victims because your client is the United States. It's not an individual. On the defense side, it's a little bit
Right.
different. And so how do you compartmentalize and how do you separate the two and how do you deal with that in your cases?
I mean, look, you can never forget that there's a victim of a crime, right? That is, of course, something we have to pay attention to and we have to be very sensitive to, not only on a human level, because going through something as the victim of crime can be very traumatic on some level to each person, but also because, you know, by law, victims, I think I froze up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I froze up there.
You did for a second, but you're back with us. It's all good.
Okay, so I'm back.
And we heard
no,
you. We heard you clear.
Okay, so it's important, I think, to also remember that victims have rights under law, whether it's the Mandatory Crime Victims Act in the federal system or the state constitution in Florida, for example, give victims rights that as prosecutors we are charged with protecting those rights as well as the defendant's rights. So I think you learn throughout your career how to handle things the best. I think obviously for any prosecutor who's dealt with child exploitation or child pornography, those are the toughest ones to see. Mm-hmm. But you have to find a way of doing it, because as horrible as a crime may be, or as horrible as it may be to that victim, and it is, and you can recognize that as a human and you can let them, for example, if a victim wants to speak at a sentencing hearing, they're gonna talk about that and they have a right to, and you have to be sensitive to that's how they feel when they have a right to be told if something's going to plea out or go to trial or whatever, and their right to be kept abreast of the trial, and they may feel frustrated sometimes, and you have to be sensitive to that because they're not lawyers and they don't know the system as well as we do. But you cannot become so involved in your emotions or in that victim's emotions that you cannot remain objective. And what I mean by that is you have to find a way to understand the victim and to obviously empathize with them when you're dealing with them, because prosecutors do have the responsibility of protecting the victim's rights, but they're not your client. No. Your interest and your job is to the United States or the state of Florida or wherever you may be a prosecutor. And that means that you do the right thing at all times. And sometimes the right thing is not always what a victim may want. I've had to sit down with victims and tell them, no, I can't file this homicide case because we don't have enough evidence. Or listen, I'm not asking for life in this one because what's appropriate is X. Those are hard conversations to have with victims, but you have to be able to have them when you are the prosecutor because your job is to do the right thing. But without being so callous and so unfeeling that you can't understand why they may be frustrated and why they may need to vent at you. And I think that that's important. It's a difficult balance to do, but you do have to find a way of doing it. And I think the more you work with victims, which I think is something that in state court people do so much, that it becomes almost part of the job, just a routine part of the job is dealing with victims. I think because of that, I was uniquely placed when I started dealing with more complicated cases, how to deal with those victims without becoming too subjective or too overwhelmed with my feelings about something, because you just can't do it. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And you also, that's very personal to each prosecutor. Each prosecutor has their own way of doing that. I don't find it so difficult to do it now in my career, but I know some people have struggled with how to find that balance for themselves, but it's a necessary one. And if you feel like you cannot find that balance, then you need to rethink maybe what you're doing, because you still have to, again, we're unique in our position. We have to balance defendants' rights with victims' rights, and that we are always held to do the right thing. And that that can often, if you can't find your place there, then you need to either move on to something else or maybe reassess how you're doing it. But that's how I've done it. I've just, I find it easy to empathize with people, but I have to let them know, look, this is not what we're doing, or this is what we're doing. And, you have a right to have your say about it. And so it's hard, but the more you do it, the better you get at it.
All right. So enough of the serious stuff. Let's talk about our fun questions. So the audience can get to know you a little bit better. We know that your family's from Puerto Rico, that you live in Miami, but you grew up somewhere very different from these two very Latino places. Tell us about that.
So I would say half my life was spent in Puerto Rico. That's where my family's from, and that's where I went to junior high and high school. But when I was little, my dad took a job in Southeast Missouri, so about 30 minutes from the Arkansas border, in a little town called Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And that's where we lived, I want to say from like maybe the age of 4 to like 10. That's where I lived. We were the only, the 4 of us, eventually the 5 of us when my brother was born there. And then Doña Marta, who was the Cuban Spanish teacher in the town. We were the only Hispanic people there. So, so that was very different from Miami, very different from Puerto Rico.
Okay. Well, what is your favorite Puerto Rican dish?
Oh God, that's so hard. My mother, my grandfather, excellent cooks. Probably serenata de bacalao, which is like a codfish dish. I really enjoy it. But mofongo's up there. Really, there's nothing I don't eat. So that's hard. Vanessa knows this about me. I'm a total foodie. I make everything. I eat everything. So, but if I had to like pick, it would probably be serenata de bacalao. Yeah.
So Vanessa told me you're a lover of 90s music. What is your favorite 90s jam?
Ooh. So I listened to everything, but I was more of a rocker. I was definitely into grunge in the 90s. I would have to say it's probably a tie between Alive by Pearl Jam and I'm Just a Girl by No Doubt. Those two songs, I remember they came out and I thought they were like amazing, and I enjoyed them a lot. I still do, but I mean, there's a lot of good rap from the 90s too. There's just a lot of good music.
Okay, so what's your favorite hip hop song from the 90s?
Probably Juicy.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
That is a good
one. I like
one.
that one a lot. It's a good story. It's well done.
And since I know you're not a fan of J-Lo, what's your favorite Mark Anthony song?
Geez, he has so many good songs. He's just such a good singer. Probably because it came out when I was in high school and we were all in love with it. I think we even played it at our graduation. I can't remember. It's Preciosa, which is not his song. It's a very traditional song back home, written by Rafael Hernandez, but he did a version of it when I was in high school and we really enjoyed that.
What was the last thing you watched on TV?
The Real Housewives of Miami.
Stop. Alex, stop. Well, you need to decompress, I guess.
Really, any Bravo show is sort of like my mindless television that I put in while I'm cooking or while I'm doing stuff. It just helps me decompress. I find, but last night was The Real Housewives of Miami, so that's what I watched.
Okay. What's one thing people don't know about you that would surprise them?
Ooh. A lot of people don't know that I was actually quite the athlete in high school. I think maybe because I'm a lawyer now and I just don't, but I was quite competitive in high school in basketball and softball. I like sports a lot. People may know that I'm a huge Red Sox fan. Yes. But they may not know that I actually played the games, which is why I enjoyed them so much. So I do not play softball now or basketball.
The U.S. Attorney's Office has a softball team, Ale. You should join that.
Yes, I know. And they have tried to recruit me many a time, but I think my sporting days in terms of playing it might be done unless it's like very relaxed. The Miami Beach Softball League is very intense. I used to play in it, so I think my days there might have ended already.
If you could have a dinner guest, anyone in the world, who would you pick?
Alive or dead?
Either one.
Either one.
Either one. Ooh. I'd probably like to talk to Winston Churchill. I find him to be fascinating.
Wow.
Really fascinating person, privileged background, but had to fight for the things that he eventually accomplished in his life because he was considered to be sort of a nitwit and totally wasn't. And I think he was able to lead a country that really had zero to little hope in the 30s and 40s of beating Germany. He was able to somehow not only get the US and Russia on board to fight the Nazis, but he somehow kept morale up and did it without sacrificing democracy, which I think is often very difficult to do. And I find him to be fascinating. I really do. Either him or RBG, but I think we all love RBG. So
Yes, she'd be a lot of people's dinner date.
yeah.
What constitutes a perfect day for you?
A perfect day?
Yes.
Oh, geez.
You know, I know you thought I said date. I did not.
I know, that's why I was like, are you asking? I'm not sure. No. I like waking up very leisurely. So like making my cup of coffee, sitting down and being able to probably read the newspaper while reading it. Probably meeting up with friends to do something. I enjoy doing things like that. If I lived in the same city as my family, probably hanging out with my family. I'm very family oriented. So, and if possible, it would be, shopping. Vanessa knows I like shopping. So if I had all the money in the world, I'd go shopping every weekend.
Yes.
Me too. You told us you're a foodie. What's your favorite Miami restaurant?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. I'm gonna have to go with a mainstay, and I really enjoy this restaurant. It's never led me down the wrong path, but Michael's Genuine. It's always good.
Yeah.
It's always reliable.
And it's in a shopping district, Ale. Look at you.
Correct. And it's in the shopping district. I mean, there are plenty of good ones. I recently went to Encierro and it was excellent. It was excellent. But my favorite in terms of like, it's just like my old faithful, and I always like to go there, is probably Michael's Genuine.
What is one thing you will never be caught wearing?
Orange. I hate the color orange. I love colors. Love colors. Vanessa knows this. I love to wear bright colors, but I hate the color orange.
What's one vice you wish you could give up?
Eating sweets as much as I do. I love sweets, but I feel like I always need to eat one after every meal, and I wish I could give that up. I wish it maybe one a day, one a week. I wish I could be that person, but I'm not.
You wouldn't be Ale, so there you go.
No,
you're a new addition to the crayon box. What color would you be? And we know it's not orange.
Ooh, it would be some sort of fiery red. I love the color red, so probably some more bluish toned red.
When are you the most inspired?
It depends, honestly. I think it depends on what season you're in. I think it depends on what you're doing. I think people can inspire you. I think I've certainly been inspired seeing people do things that they love. I'm inspired by my parents, who I love a lot and who have taught me a lot of things, both life and professionally. I'm inspired by, I take my religion very seriously. So I'm inspired when I tap into that as well. So, and sometimes you're just inspired by sitting on your balcony and watching the sunset. I think it just depends on the time.
So you're from Puerto Rico. You know the island like the back of your hand. What's
Yes,
your
I do.
favorite? What is your favorite beach in Puerto Rico?
Ooh, that's a hard one. We have so many good ones, and I'm not plugging Puerto Rican tourism, but I might as well. Oof. If I were surfing, it would be Tres Palmas in Isabela. But if I were just going to enjoy the water and just sort of hang out, it would probably be Mar Chiquita in Manatí. That's a nice little beach, and it's very pretty.
If you were able to live until you were 90, and you could either one, retain your mind, or keep your body at age 25, which one would you choose?
My mind. My grandmother is 92. Her mind is intact. Her body may not be completely intact, though she's in good health. But you have your mind, you have it all. She's still alert. You can still do things, you know, you can always still contribute if you have your mind. Bodies are meant to fade. So
You'll have your 25-year-old mind, though, Ale. Keep that into consideration.
I wasn't that bad at 25. I wasn't that bad.
What is your greatest accomplishment in life?
I think it's my friendships and my relationships. I think everything else passes away. Even your career at some point will cease, right? At some point you're going to retire, hopefully. But your relationships always remain. And if you've got good relationships in your life, that's all that matters.
Miami has been cold as of late. What do you prefer, cold or the heat?
Ugh, Vanessa knows this answer, cold. Cold, cold, cold. I like it cold. My air conditioning is also very cold at all times. But I don't like Arctic. So Miami's perfect. I can be in cold air conditioning all the time. And I want to be outside.
Diamonds or pearls, Ale?
I'm going to go with diamonds just because pearls are also for funerals. But I like pearls. So
Pick 3 words, only 3 words that define you.
loyal, dedicated, and fun.
I love it. What's the best advice you ever received?
Gosh, I've gotten a lot of good advice over the years. So I'm going to give 2 because I can't really pick between these 2. I had a high school teacher once because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, shocker from a lawyer. And I was upset over something in high school. So God only knows what it would have been. And he took me out to the softball field because I played softball. And he picked up a blade of grass and he goes, this field is your life. This blade of grass is whatever the issue I was having or whatever test it was. He's like, this is nothing. Just, you'll be fine. Right. And I've never forgotten that. I think the other thing that I've sort of treasured is my father's advice to just whatever it is that you do, whether it's your relationships or your work, always do it to the best of your ability. Because you'll never regret anything if you've done it to the best of your ability. You'll regret it if you did it and things didn't turn out right.
Yeah. If you could switch lives with one person for one day, who would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. Vanessa knows this about me. I've always had a weird fascination with royalty. So I'm going to have to go say like Kate, Princess of Wales, just to see what that's like for a day, just to see what that would be like for one day. And then I'd go back because I think I'd get annoyed about it after a while, but just one day.
Lots of diamonds. Lots of diamonds.
You'd have your diamonds, right?
And
That's
lots
right.
of shopping.
Exactly.
What's one talent you wish you had?
I wish I was better at drawing. My sister's the artist in the family and she's an amazing artist. I cannot draw worth my life. If I was asked to draw something well or be shot, I'd be shot. So I wish I was a better artist.
Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
I still see myself as a prosecutor. Still see myself doing this job, maybe not in the same area, but still doing this job. Hopefully with the same friendships and relationships I've had over the years. Yeah, that's where I see myself. This is my vocation, so I don't see myself doing anything different. Unless the Supreme Court comes calling, which, you know, it does.
You never know. You
By
never
all
know.
means.
You could
By
be
all
the
means.
next Sotomayor. You don't know.
For
Okay.
sure.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to young women entering the profession?
Oof. It's probably going to be the same 2 pieces of advice because it's just hard to pick one when you're in this profession. The first is to find balance. It's so hard as women to find balance. I think women naturally, we want to overdo and over perform. I think it's just how we like to do things, we like to take care of things. And sometimes as a female, it's very easy to lose that balance in the profession, especially because sometimes, not always, but sometimes we feel like we have to overperform in order to be taken as seriously or to be treated as well as some of our male colleagues. So finding that balance between your work life and your professional life is absolutely necessary. If you don't, you'll be a great attorney, but you won't have a really great life. So that's one. But I've also told people, women coming into the profession, you don't be afraid to be underestimated and not taken seriously. I think some of my best trials have been with defense counsel and jurors who underestimated me and then found out that was not right. So don't be afraid. I feel like we often feel like we have to prove ourselves a lot. Yeah. And that's not necessarily true. Let your work and your talent speak for themselves, but don't be afraid to don't be offended by it. Just sort of laugh it off and move on. That's what I do. Can't take it seriously.
We've hit our 36 questions with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me, guys.
We loved having you, and I hope you have a great Friday. I hope it's filled with lots of shopping.
Yes.
And sweets.
I wish. I still make a government salary, guys. I still make a government salary.
All right. It's great to see you, honey. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, sweetie.
Thank you.